What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm trying something completely new and completely different for the channel. So rather than go through an engine build and dyno tuning type of video, I'm actually doing a podcast style interview with Matt Smith from those dyno guys over in the United States. Let me know what you think of this type of content. Drop some comments for me down the bottom and let me know what you think. But yeah, Matt and I are very excited about this video. We want to do more of them and make them a regular thing. And I'd really love to get a few other guests on here as well. Cyclerama being one of them. So Wes and Pam, I want to get you guys on here and have a conversation with you guys about your shop. I'd really like to get Ben from Alpha Performance Engines on here as well to discuss all things performance as well. So I want to try and bring the best content available and information available out there to you guys, you know, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. So if we can get the right stuff out there, that helps you guys. It helps me and it helps everyone. So enjoy the content for what it is and I'll catch you at the end. So welcome to the first podcast style interview for my channel, guys. Obviously a lot of my viewers, you'll know that this is a completely different type of video for me. So I'm just trying to do something new. And I'm very lucky to be joined by my first guest on this type of video is Matt Smith from the United States. So Matt, if you wanted to introduce yourself and just let some of my viewers know who you are, what you do, where you're from, and how long you've been doing it, and anything else that you think some of the viewers might be interested in knowing about yourself.
All right. Well, thanks, Tommy. I'm Matt Smith. I'm president of Those Dyno Guys. I am also the only tuner at Those Dyno Guys. Originate from Minnesota in the United States. And 2 years ago, I moved from Minnesota to Florida, and I'm actually residing on the same campus as Cyclerama Industries. So I've got actually Those Dyno Guys is celebrating 10 years this year, or actually this July. So wow. I've been doing it full time since then.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So you mentioned you're on the same sort of, like in the same sort of property or premises as Cyclerama there. That's been a recent move for you, you said you've just moved in there with President Pam?
I was down in Sarasota, Florida, and I had been coming up to tune for Cyclerama every Thursday and Friday for about a year, and then it was just kind of a natural progression. I approached Pam and Wes to see if they were interested in leasing out one of their buildings, and we struck up that conversation, and here we are at Those Dyno Guys headquarters now.
We, as a lot of my viewers know, we do I personally use a lot of the Cyclerama products in a lot of my builds. So a lot of their camshafts I find outstanding. I mean, I'm sure you'll probably agree, Matt, there are a heap of different cams available out there on the market. And I mean, in my opinion, and you know, by all means, push back if you like, Matt, but in my opinion, it sort of boils down to really only about three options. You have like a torque cam, you have more of an aggressive higher horsepower cam, and then you've got something that you can sort of find that sort of fits in the middle that's kind of the best of both worlds. And when you find a lot of the grinds there, some of the really key ones that I use a lot of, the timing and the duration and the lift are all very similar to one another within a couple of degrees, just enough so they can call themselves a different grind or a different cam. So
yeah, that's exactly what I see with them. You know, a lot of those cams, you can dress them up, you can dress them down. You can use them as bolt-in, a lot of them you can take them a step further, and depending on the displacement of the engine, you can get a completely different result and attitude with the same camshaft.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah,
very versatile.
For sure. I mean, that's the beauty of some of the Cyclerama cams I use. Like as you said, you can dress them up or down, and a lot of them being bolt-in cams. Yeah, you can just throw them in a 114 at standard comp and tune them up really nicely, or yeah, you can throw displacement at them and really, really turn the heat up on them and really get some awesome results out of them. So, yeah, did you want to touch on any key questions you might have from customers about, you know, what camshaft I should run? Like I'm sure, like as engine builders and engine tuners, I mean, I'm sure we can point out that there's quite a few key common questions that we get asked all the time. And the idea of this video was, and this conversation was just to try and use this so some of my viewers, and then we can even just share this link to people so they can come here and get a bit of an insight as to some of those key common questions that they may have for yourself or me. So
Sure.
Yeah.
I think first question's obvious. What cam should I run? And the conversation I have with my customers is, how are you riding the bike? You know, what kind of bike is it? Is it a cruiser? Is it a touring bike? You know, what are we doing with the bike? Are you riding with a passenger often? Are you playing with the trailer? You know, what is the purpose of the motorcycle and how are they riding it? So I have to kind of go through that and have an interview process with them and figure out, you know, what best cam is for them. So when people on the internet just blatantly ask a question, what's the best cam to use? It's such a loaded question and it's so subjective to answer it.
Yeah.
Without that personal consultation. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that sounds exactly, I mean, very similar to how we sort of approach it here, especially when, I mean, I'm sort of known for doing what I do here at this dealership, and a lot of customers will come in and ask to speak with me, and the process sounds very similar to what you do. I generally have a good sit down with the customer and say, you know, what are you, like pretty much exactly what you just said there, like what are you doing with the bike? What are your intentions? What are your expected gains out of the bike? And really try and tailor that package down, because, yeah, as you said, it is a very, very loaded question when people say, what's the best cam for my street glide? And you're like, well, do you want to do wheelies? Do you want to tour it around? Like, yeah, as you know, it's a very, very loaded question. So,
right. Yeah, I mean, you could have the exact same bike, the same camshaft, and the only difference being mufflers, and have a completely different result. You know, I've shown it over and over again, and I've actually done videos with just adding baffles to the Chromework systems, for instance.
For sure.
You know, with just adding a little bit of back pressure to so many of these builds, I mean, at 2,500 RPMs, it can mean the difference of 25 foot-pounds of torque, which in a heavy touring bike is of the utmost importance.
Absolutely. Cam numbers or the grind number of the camshaft generally doesn't mean, like, if you have like, generally the bigger the number, the bigger the horsepower is what most people sort of say, but that's not necessarily true in so many cases, because the manufacturer of the camshaft can call the cam whatever they like. They could call a cam a 600 or a 650 where it only may have, you know, 450,000 lift or so. I'd just like to point that out to some of the guys out there, that especially when they see comments, you know, you go through comments online and you see people, oh, well, you know, my 550 does this, and, you know, but you've got something like a 480 or a 485 that will outperform a 550 in so many different areas. So I'd just like to point that out to some of the viewers, that, yeah, the bigger the number doesn't necessarily mean the more horsepower the camshaft will produce, because a lot of different manufacturers name their cams on, some of them name them on duration, some of them name them on lift, some of them name them just on a grind number just for their recording. So it generally doesn't mean,
right.
Yeah, more horsepower you're going to make.
And even if they're naming it after their lift, I mean, let's take the 485, for instance. You know, right now, I think on the market, there's 4 different 485s on the market.
Yeah.
And they're all very, very different in their characteristics. So it would be a complete misstep for someone just to assume like it's all the same camshaft just because of the they share one number.
That's right. Yeah.
Lift. I tell my customers, lift has very little to do with performance, especially with these Milwaukee 8s. I'm finding where we'll say the old school guys that had to lift their shovel heads, their evolutions, their twin cams, they had to put, you know, 575 lifts on them, or 600 lifts, or 650 lifts. These Milwaukee 8s just don't require that kind of lift for general street applications.
Exactly.
Now, if they're working with ported heads and high compression, sure, you could make use of all of that with some extra lift. But boy, for the vast majority of folks,
yeah, the performance you get out of a low lift camshaft is outstanding for what we're trying to achieve. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts, Matt, on I know I put a post up there on my Instagram and Facebook a little while ago talking about fuel injectors and how a lot of people too may associate a bigger injector with horsepower, where that's obviously, you know, that's not the case. I mean, in some cases where you're running out of fuel, for sure you need more injectors in there. For sure you need a bigger hole. Like, there's only so much fuel a smaller injector can deliver. However,
I see it time and time again. Yeah, some of the guys will have the 5.5 GPS injectors out of the Screaming Eagle catalog, and then others will have a 6.2 from the aftermarket with the same engine combination, and they think maybe the bigger injector size should produce more horsepower, and obviously that's not the case. Did you want to maybe elaborate on that a little bit, Matt, and just tell the guys a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, the 4.3 injector that comes stock in these Milwaukee 8s, 4.3 injectors, I mean, we're going back to the mid 2000s with the twin cams.
Mm-hmm.
And the twin cams came out of the factory with 65 horse and that same injector. Now the Milwaukee 8s in the stock form, a lot of them are, 80 horsepower. So it's just general practice. Anyone that was building a hot twin cam, you put bigger injectors in it, unless you were, didn't really know what you're doing. But most people, if they were building a hot rod twin cam, they're putting big manifolds, big injectors, and doing that. Now, what I'm finding with the Milwaukee 8s, the stock injectors, for all practical purposes, is good for about 125 horsepower. At that point, it really starts giving you problems, and it can really affect the tunability of that cam, or not the cam, but of that bike and that combination of parts.
For sure.
The Screaming Eagle 5.5 injectors, they're very versatile. If the tuner knew what they're doing, they could run them in a stock bike, all the way up to about 145 to 50 horsepower is where I find the ceiling with those.
Yeah.
I have taken them on some really efficient combinations deep into the 150s, but it's very, very rare. And I've got to do some pretty gnarly tuning tricks in order to pull that off.
For sure. Yeah.
With the 114, Milwaukee 8 and 117, when I recommend camshafts and we're trying to get, the utmost performance from that machine, I just tell them to update the intake manifold. They can leave the 55 on there. Just do like a ported 55 or 55 aluminum manifold. Get rid of that plastic one.
Yep.
And then just go ahead, if they're camming them up, put a 6.2 injector in there, because that's going to be a big enough injector for them when they're bored with their cam job and they want to do a big bore kit later on. They don't have to buy parts again.
Exactly
again,
right.
If
yeah.
the tuner knows what they're doing, they can cheat those things up and down and do different adjustments to make those 6.2s work. And then it just kind of goes from there. So I think we'll stop at 6.2s with the injectors, because then it could get really confusing.
Yeah.
And the carry over, I think the biggest misconception with injectors carries over from the diesel performance world, where they needed big injectors to make big power. And it's a totally different animal with a V-twin versus a diesel.
For sure. Exactly. Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about there too, Matt, with certain tricks and manipulation to the tune, obviously setting up the algorithm, I guess, basically of the tune. I mean, there are a few tricks there that as a good tuner, you can, manipulate those figures or those numbers of the injectors and the VE and displacement size of the motor to really, get those 6.2s working really well. So there was another thing I wanted to chat about too, Matt. Obviously, another thing in the comment section I generally see a lot of here. A lot of the guys, I think, see correction factors on the dyno charts, and they say, oh, well, it's SAE or it's standard. It'll show more on this or show more on that. But what it really boils down to is we're talking about the before and after gains of the tune and the engine work or the engine build. So when a bike comes in stock, I use a standard correction factor, like STD, standard correction factor here. Some guys use SAE, but as long as you're using the same correction factor for the before and after run, it is irrelevant as to what correction factor you're using. And I just don't know why so many people get excited about saying the standard correction factor will inflate the dyno figure. Because if it's inflating the dyno figure, all it's doing is inflating the standard base run of the dyno. So it's really not doing anything different. Did you want to chat on about that a little bit, or?
Well, exactly. If there's a before and after, you're looking at the percentage gain. And coincidentally, the same people that complain about people using STDs, they never ever complain that the baseline looks high.
Yeah.
Exactly. All the baselines are always right in line with what everyone else is getting with SAEs, and it really depends on the dyno.
Yeah.
And I'm I'm going to touch base on the dyno itself. So the DynoJet dyno, that is kind of the industry standard, the motorcycle world.
100%.
Right from DynoJet, they guarantee those dynos to be plus or minus 3% from each other. So you could literally have a 6% swing
Between
using the same model dyno.
Yeah.
So the choice to do STD, SAE, whatever, that could be your environment that you're in. It could be your elevation you're in. It could be any number of factors.
For sure.
Now with those dyno guys, I use a 250iX. So I'm actually spinning up a trike dyno when I'm doing bikes. And when you add that second drum onto that dyno, you will never have the same acceleration rate as you would with a single drum dyno. It's going to take longer. DynoJet doesn't have two separate algorithms to calculate horsepower and torque. You know, they adjust it ever so slightly, but it's the same algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll never, because there's a different time factor with spinning up that drum, the trike dyno will always be a little lower.
For sure.
So that's why, that's just one of the many reasons I use STD. The other reason is in Florida, it's a swamp here. High humidity, high temperatures. It's like the worst tuning conditions possible.
Yeah.
So STD normalizes it back to 77 degrees and 29.2 for barometric pressure. And why that's important is if you're a guy in the Midwest tuning with a certain combination of parts, and I'm down here tuning, and you're an SAE up there, and now I'm STD down here, you're probably going to notice that we're going to have very, very similar results.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more than meets the eye there. And as long as going full circle, going back to the original, if you got before and after results, do the baseline before you do a cam job, and then you have your final result, you're looking at that percentage gain, not so much the
numbers,
the final number.
Exactly right. Yeah. There was an experiment I did because obviously with Alpha Performance Engines here in Australia, their headquarters is in Gladstone, which is directly, like it is on sea level. And of course, where I am here in Toowoomba, I'm about 2,200 feet above sea level. And we both use the same dyno. It's a 250i DynoJet dyno. We run a lot of the same similar tuning software, and we see combinations that are very similar, or if not the same. And obviously we have higher numbers down or up in Gladstone because they're at sea level. And here where I'm in Toowoomba, my numbers are obviously a little bit lower because the engine literally just does not have the air to breathe that it does down at sea level. So, and I did do an experiment with Mark from APE about that. We took a bike that was built and tuned in Gladstone and then brought it up here to Toowoomba, put it on the dyno, and there. You generally lose, we have found, you generally lose about 3% of your horsepower per 1,000 feet you go up in elevation. And the mathematics the day that we did the test was spot on. It was about a 6% difference because, 2,200 feet above sea level here. And the bike was, the 6% difference was just on the money. So obviously elevation does play a big role in what the engine will produce at the end of the day, because it just physically, there's just not enough air for the engine, just cannot get the air it can down at sea level due to the pressure difference, obviously. So
if the engine doesn't have the oxygen to produce that power, you're going to have a lower number. So like me, I'm basically at sea level here in Pinellas Park, Florida. When I was in Minnesota, I was only about 800 feet. So there wasn't a huge difference in elevation. But yeah, if we were doing a apples to apples comparison, someone out in the Western United States in the mountains, they're going to have much, much lower numbers. So getting into that numbers game on the dyno is a very, very, that's a fool's game. We'll just say it's a fool's game.
Yeah.
Because those guys can chase their tails. If we're getting 150 here and they're getting 135 in the mountains, they should be happy with that.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. There was a couple of things I was going to say about just trying to move through some of these topics so we're not dragging out too long here. But what is your opinion, Matt, on the stock clutch in the Milwaukee 8? I mean, obviously we generally update clutch springs to the 1275 Newton springs from Screaming Eagle or any aftermarket options, but generally in my opinion, and Matt, push back if you can or would like to, but I feel the stock clutch is generally fine for even, guys up to 140, 150 horsepower. As long as you've got heavy duty springs in there holding it together, I am yet to see any issues with the stock clutch. I mean, I saw some photos online of things being, the basket coming apart, but I'm not sure if that's to do with operator abuse or component failure, because I build these motors on a daily basis, like on a weekly basis. I'm building one of these engines, and I have yet to see a clutch failure, like a catastrophic failure. I've seen, obviously, people can burn clutches out, but yeah, in my opinion, if you've just got the heavy duty springs and they're holding it together, for 90% of the guys out there, I believe it's fine.
Yeah, I'm in the same opinion. These Milwaukee 8s, Harley knew what they were doing when they put that slipper clutch in these Milwaukee 8s. They knew that with the tremendous amount of torque that these Milwaukee 8s are capable of, that they were going to need a slipper clutch just to have their transmissions survive. So I've made it standard practice. If I'm going to do a cam in a bike, I'm putting clutch springs in that bike. And that's all that bike's ever going to need. Lock-up clutches, everything else, it's just, that's a Pandora's box item, because where do you stop?
For sure.
There's going to be, the motorcycle is going to find the next weakest link. So if you put, a chain on that bike, which I think that's where people are coming into problems. If you start putting drive chains on the bike and taking the belts off that will break before anything else breaks, now that bike's going to find the next weakest link. So if now you got 100%. A chain drive on there, now you're going to blow apart probably your clutch basket before you do any other damage.
Exactly, yeah.
But it's very important to go back to what Harley originally designed with that slipper clutch. They knew that third gear was a very small gear, and they knew their torque outputs of these engines. And they knew they're going to have troubles, so they tried to save their customers some trouble by engineering some give and slip in that transmission.
Absolutely.
Stock tranny and the stock clutch is my go-to.
Yeah. No, as I said, I'm yet to see any catastrophic failures. I mean, I've had, so many people ask me about it, like, oh, I can't believe you built that motor without a clutch. And it's like, well, my general first question is to that person in the comment section is, how many engines have you built, and what does your clutch look like? Because, if you don't build engines and you've got no idea what you're talking about as far as what's going on, just to assume that something's not done because it isn't a pretty billet component that you see, on the Instagram pages or whatever, doesn't necessarily mean it's junk. I mean, as you said, Harley knew what they were doing. They engineered the clutch. They knew, like the engineers at Harley do, in my opinion, know what they're talking about. I mean, sure, most new products, it doesn't matter who the manufacturer, there will be teething issues for sure. And I mean, Harley just have really come to the party with the Milwaukee 8. It is such a good platform to build power from.
I agree.
What are your thoughts, Matt? Obviously, the new VVT in the CVO coming out. Obviously, there's a redesigned cylinder head, shorter intake runner, the manifold. There's a few differences there. What are your thoughts on this? Are you pretty excited about this one?
All I see is opportunity.
For sure. Yeah.
People, a lot of times, they don't like change, and I look at it as just opportunity. It's another opportunity to learn something
100%.
New. Another opportunity to make power. So as we progress and the aftermarket progresses, we're going to find tips and tricks and everything else that's going to accentuate that VVT platform, just like the original Milwaukee 8 platform.
For sure.
I haven't got into one yet, but I'm presuming that it's nothing but a phasing mechanism. Its camshaft is probably going to look very similar. Might be a gear on the end of it or a timing belt or something. I'm not sure it's going to run that phaser.
I have, sorry to cut you off there, but I have seen and done a lot of the training on the new VVT, and because it's not, I can't obviously relate, like, it's no secrets, but just because I've seen it on my HD net here, that I'm not sort of allowed to sort of talk about it just as yet due to the date here in Australia. But basically it's going to be a very similar setup to what you were just speaking of. But yeah, I'm very excited about it. Obviously, tuning capabilities are going to be very limited, I think, for the early stages with obviously the EPA requirements and things like that. But I'm sure once that sort of area becomes unlocked, we will be well, I personally, as you said, I think it's an opportunity to really get in there and learn something new and really, reevaluate my skills and learn how to tune these things and just play around with different camshafts and really see how we go with it. So I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, I've been reading up on VVT systems, and the approach that I'm going to take is look at BMW automobiles. They've used variable valve timing for decades now. There's a lot to learn by just reading up on that. So I'm going to use some of those same principles with that and apply it to Harley-Davidsons.
For sure. Well, Matt, was there anything else you wanted to touch on or let the people know about, or anything you'd like to mention?
Oh, geez, where do you start?
Well, we have time. If you want, we have time.
Let's touch on tuners, if you would.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, yeah. Well, some of the ones that I use. You go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, obviously, some of the one that I recommend and I am most fluent with. Actually, I'm glad you brought this up, Matt. I can't believe it slipped my mind. Obviously, the one I use most is Direct Link from Techno Research, or the Maximus, the black box. Now, that's the one I use the most. Now, I am most fluent with that one. And again, in the comment section, you get a lot of guys saying, well, what if you use this tuner and what if you use that tuner? Well, as long as you have full adjustability of what you're trying to do. So I'm not talking about the Screaming Eagle Street tuner, because that thing, I just don't even waste my time with. There's not enough adjustment in it, and I don't even waste my time. But if we're talking about Power Vision, we're talking about TTS, we're talking about Techno Research, I can use them all, and I will tune with them all. I am just more fluent, and I'm I'm a lot quicker with using Techno Research because I've used that interface for a long time now, and I'm just very fluent with it. And as long as you know what you're doing as a tuner, you will get the same, if not very, very similar results if you're using a TDS, a Power Vision, or Techno Research. And that's just my opinion on that one.
Yeah, as a professional tuner, it really just comes down to what screen do you want to look at. Because at the heart of all those tuners, you're doing the exact same thing. You're manipulating volumetric efficiency tables, AFR calls, ignition timing. Those are the big three. Throttle progressivity. There's just a bunch of different ways to get the same result. Now, with the EPA cracking down in the United States here, Techno isn't available to us anymore, but Power Vision is, and that's been my go-to. Yep. I've just found that it's very, very universal. I can use it on anything from 2001 Harley all the way up to 2023 with one platform. Someone has a TTS, sure, I'll tune that. Someone has Direct Link. I can still tune Direct Link, no problem. I just can't purchase Direct Link anymore.
I do like the fact that when you're when you're recording live data on Techno Research with Direct Link, you can see exactly what cell you're on, where you're at, and it just speeds the process up for me. Whereas something like TTS, you've got live data on this screen, and then you're cross-referencing to that cell, and then you're looking at the VE table, and you're right, I'm at 10% at 2200, or Whereas Direct Link, it highlights the cell, and I just like that just for the speed of the tuning capability. But as I think I did see one of your videos earlier, Matt, you did a quick post about the street tuner, the Screaming Eagle street tuner, and how the limited adjustability of it, you cannot tune correctly or even remotely closely to how you should be trying to tune an engine with that. I mean, when you can't change the target AFR and you've only got, I think it's 6 or 7% adjustment on the VE, it's just not enough to achieve the goal.
Yeah, it's really not. And I won't put my name on a tune using that, because if I can't show my best tune to a customer, I don't want to show it at all. Let's branch off onto O2 collection. I think that is a pitfall in the industry in general, where a lot of tuners are having troubles with tuning in general. And I think a lot of it has to do with how they are getting their data. Back in the carbureted days, sniffer up the tailpipe was accurate enough, but with fuel injection, it's just not accurate enough anymore. So, like, I use a product from Techno Research, It's their TRO2
think,
kit.
actually, just while you're on that, Matt, because I happen to be right beside my toolbox. I believe you'll be talking about this guy with the box. Yep.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and it's just a really nice handy kit to get your O2 sensors without having 18mm bungs.
For sure.
Extremely close to the heads for an accurate collection point. And that's going to speed up a lot of these guys' tunes. You know, I hear customers, oh, they had my bike on the dyno for 3 days. And I think a lot of that could be helped by simply better data collection.
Sure. So I will just touch on that for the people watching. What Matt's talking about is on the primary tube of the header pipe, this block is able to be huck riveted in. So we put a little huck, we drill a hole in the header pipe, we put a huck rivet in there, and then there's a hollow Allen headed bolt that screws in and holds this block in place. And then we fit the external O2 sensor from the dyno to the header pipe. And obviously we run two. If you have WinPep 8 on your dyno like I do, you can run two O2s at once. Or if you're on WinPep 7, you run one at a time. You tune the rear first and then the front, or vice versa.
Right.
Yeah, but I'm pretty.
Yep.
What is your opinion on the catalytic converter? I mean, obviously we probably tread carefully there for any EPA regulations. But what are your thoughts on the cat in the header pipe of the Tourers and some of the soft? I believe it's in the fat bob. I believe there is a cat in the header pipe of the fat bob only. I believe in the soft parts, but definitely all in the Tourers.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's so many aftermarket mufflers that aren't good that the catalytic converter can actually help those systems work a little bit better. So it really depends. Again, goes on to the mufflers. You know, what mufflers are they using? You know, if they're using a very wide open muffler and they're looking for bottom end torque,
It's not going to work.
they better leave that catalytic converter in there. If they're looking for all out performance and they want to drop those temperatures, the operating temperatures, get rid of the cat and tune for it accordingly. Yep.
For sure. Not sure if there's much else left to. I mean, I'm sure we could go on for hours and hours, Matt. We're trying to sort of keep the video as, I guess, appropriate for YouTube in some degree. But yeah, I did want to try and just have a conversation. I may try and do more of these videos with guys over the world, and maybe even if I can get Wes and Pam from Cyclorama on one and chat to those guys about obviously what they do, and obviously maybe even get the guys from Alpha Performance Engines on here as well, just to have a bit of a chat about that. But yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time. Matt obviously was finishing up a dyno tune before this call, so yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time on, I believe it's Friday afternoon over there for you, mate. You probably want to get out of there and get home and enjoy the weekend. So yeah, I really appreciate you coming on and chatting with me about this stuff, mate. Is there anything else you think we should cover, or anything else you think we should point out at least?
No, I think for our first video, I think we'll leave it here, and we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, for sure, mate. That'd be great. Well, yeah, absolutely.
Thanks
Not
for inviting me on.
All right. Well, thanks for checking this video out, guys. I really appreciate it. Matt, thanks again for joining me.
Thanks, Tommy.
Well, thanks very much for sticking around and checking that out, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I do know that the video quality probably isn't the best, as I wasn't using the greatest camera for it. I was just using a basic webcam for the interview. So I do want to get some better equipment if you guys really like this sort of content, but I definitely want to do more of it. So I will invest in a better camera setup for these type of podcast style interviews. Thank you very much for sticking around and checking it out, guys, and I'll see you again in another video really soon.